So with us today as our speaker is Dr. Brian Alford from Stone Lab over in Put-in-Bay, Gibraltar Island, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I think, there's a lot of significance to Lake Erie, obviously the history, the Battle of Lake Erie, the economy at Lake Erie brings to Ottawa County, 100 miles of shoreline. And so I think it's a great speaker on a timely topic for this organization to have. So we're very, very blessed to have Dr. Alford. He grew up in Vicksburg, Mississippi. He earned his bachelor and master's degree in biology from the University of Southern Mississippi and his PhD in fisheries management at Mississippi State University. Dr. Alford worked as a senior fisheries research biologist for Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries in Baton Rouge from 2013 to 2019, and he was an assistant professor of fisheries ecology conservation at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Since December of 2019, he has served as assistant director of OSU's Stone Lab in Put-in-Bay. Here he oversees Stone Lab's research, education, and outreach programming. He lives in Port Clinton with his wife, Amy. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alford.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate it. There we go. How about that? A little better. Okay. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here and be out with folks in my community. I may work in Put-in-Bay every day, rain, sleet, or snow, or ice. But Port Clinton is my home and my wife's home. So thank you for having me here in Ottawa County. I'm going to talk to you about our programming that we do at Stone Laboratory. So I know this is a historical society meeting, so I won't talk too much science to you, but there is some historical properties that we have at Stone Lab that we manage, like the South Bass Lighthouse, Jay Cook's Castle, Perry's Lookout, where Perry's men were encamped during the Battle of Lake Erie. I'll talk a little bit about those, but I am by no means an expert in those things. I'm a fisheries person, aquatic ecology person. I came up here to study and teach about Lake Erie, but I do like history too. So I'll try to answer any questions you may have about those things as best I can, but here we go. So you know where we're located. You're all Ottawa County. You've probably been to Put-in-Bay before. We're one of the Lake Erie Islands, just off Catawba. So Gibraltar Island, where Stone Lab is, this little spit of island just to the north of downtown Put-in-Bay. If you go to the Boardwalk Restaurant or the Keys or Mossbacks or something like that, and you look across the bay, there's that 3-story building that looks like nothing's ever happening, but I guarantee you there is. But that's Gibraltar Island. And I take a ferry to work every day. And then in the wintertime, when the ferry shut down, we fly over. Not every day, but so... I'm glad to have the airport here, the ferry system here. Very lucky to be able to get back and forth. This is Stone Laboratory on Gibraltar Island. Gibraltar Island is called Gibraltar Island because it kind of looks like the Rock of Gibraltar if you look at it from a map. We're one of about 22 of the Lake Erie archipelago of islands. We were saved from glaciation due to the very hard dolomitic limestone that is out there. Although it's a very hard limestone out there, I was just looking at some aerial photography from 1958 because we've got some erosion issues out there with the high lake water levels. We've actually lost about an acre of rock over the past 50 years or so just from all the wave action from erosion. So we always say we're at 6.5 acres, but we're really closer to 6 now. So historically, believe it or not, we were the very first biological field station in the country. We've actually been around since 1895 as the Lake Biology Station. We were housed at a fish hatchery in Sandusky from 1895 to 1903. We were actually at Cedar Point, believe it or not, until we moved over to the closed down federal fish hatchery on Put-Bay in 1918. And then in 1925, we became Stone Lab instead of the Lake Laboratory. One of the board of trustees, his name was Julius Stone, pictured here. He was an OSU board of trustees member. He was a scientist in his own right. If you know Wesley Powell of Colorado River fame, he was with that group that helped explore and discover a lot of the Colorado River. There's a book of his up on our island that he wrote about his Colorado River explorations. He bought the house from Jay Cook's family, the Barneys, Laura Barney's family, in 1925. We just found out earlier this spring how much he bought it for. It was $40,001 from the Barney's family, and now it's worth well over however many millions. But he was one of 8 OSU Board of Trustees members. He dearly loved and remembered his dad fondly, who had passed away by that time. But his dad was an astronomer in Berlin. And under that time, they were part of Prussia. They were persecuted, the elites were, for their educational beliefs and whatnot. So his father actually immigrated to Southeast Michigan. And one of our friends of Stone Lab members, his name is Bruce Stone. This was his family. He actually went to visit Franz Stone's parcel of land in Southeast Michigan. And he said, I now understand why he was an astronomer, because he was a terrible farmer. And he picked a terrible place to try to grow corn. He was not a very good farmer. But Julius ended up making his money, working his way up through the railroad system, made a ton of money. So Julius came up in the railway system, made a ton of money in the railways, bought Gibraltar Island from the Barney family in 1925. And the first thing he did was deed the property over to OSU. So OSU has owned and operated Gibraltar Island as part of its property since 1925, and he wanted it to be specifically for the research, education, and outreach of all things Lake Erie, and that's what it's been since 1925. So we thank him and his family for that. You may recognize some historical names on here. Jose de Rivera, Jay Cook. I'll talk very briefly about Jay Cook's castle. Which we have tours of. Is the mic off again? Yeah. I think it's the batteries. I can talk louder. I can use my coach voice. I used to coach basketball. I'll just use my coach's voice. So yeah. So our mission is threefold: 3 legs of a stool: research, education, and outreach. So those are the 3 things that we do. It's all about Lake Erie and the Great Lakes. Even though I didn't step foot on a Great Lake till I interviewed for this job about 5 years ago, I'm still learning a lot about Lake Erie and the Great Lakes, and that's what we teach and do out there. One of the most popular things that we do in Port Clinton school students, Oak Harbor school students, in fact, Ottawa County Community Foundation pays for any school group, homeschool, private school, public school in Ottawa County to do a field trip with us for 1 or 2 days. And it's fantastic to have all these Ottawa County kids come over. So we offer these Lake Erie science field trips where kids 5th through 12th grade spend either 1 day or 2 days with us, and they get a 2-hour science cruise. So we take them out on one of our research vessels, and they get to pull plankton nets and sample for bugs in the bottom of the lake. They end it with a fish trawl where they set the trawl net, pull the trawl in, and they see all the fish that comes up, like the big walleye and perch. And then they take all their samples back to our lab on Gibraltar Island. They put them under a microscope, and they get to look at all the plankton and all this kind of stuff. And we do things like bird walks, so where we give them binoculars, and they learn to identify birds. They learn to identify plants on the island. We have herpetology, so we have our own herp colony. If you don't know what herps are, they're snakes, frogs, and toads. So we keep snakes and turtles and frogs there on Gibraltar Island, and we bring them out for people to hold and touch. I didn't bring any with me today. Don't worry. But we talk about geology and history as well. We have glacial grooves, believe it or not, on Gibraltar Island. So if you come over for a tour in the summer, you can see our glacial grooves are not nearly as impressive as Kelly's Island. But nonetheless, they're there. But the point of our field trip program is what we call experiential learning. We want our kids that come over to get hands-on experiences, touching and feeling the critters that are in Lake Erie. It can't be all about, you're not going to come to an island and look at a PowerPoint presentation, right? So everything we do with these kids is about holding and touching. So this is one of our snakes at the bottom here. You can see this video. That's Bernadette. And there's Sue Bixler, our education specialist. She takes snakes with her to school groups all across the mainland, from Toledo, or Ashtabula to Toledo, to teach people about the herps of the Lake Erie Islands. Here in the top right, you can see these are some kids, probably from Ottawa County, dissecting fish that they just got off the trawl. So they're taking fish right out of the lake. We're sacrificing them. They're cutting them open to learn all about the fish. So if you have a queasy stomach, it's probably not for you, but the kids love it. And one thing that makes it hands-on is they're actually collecting data. You can see this little sheet that says Limnology Data Sheet at the bottom. ODW, the office, or Ohio Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, or Division of Wildlife, excuse me, getting my states mixed up. They actually take our data and they use it to help them set quotas for perch and walleye every year. So we use the same methods that they do on their trawls for their perch and walleye sampling program. Here's an example of a trawl from one of our biological field station assistants. So we offer 6 positions seasonally. So if you know of a recent graduate that wants to get some experience teaching about biology in Lake Erie, here's one of our biological field station assistants, Tyler, teaching to a group of middle schoolers about some fish that they sampled in Lake Erie. So they just pulled in the trawl. They're dumping the fish out onto the boat. And now the kids are going to get to touch them, and he's going to talk about them.
Does anyone know what this type of fish is?
Bluegill. No.
This is a yellow perch. So this is a lot of people are coming out here to the western basin of Lake Erie to fish for MTV. It's a really fun one. Anyone know what this is? Look at the big eye.
Wait, no.
So this is a walleye. Yeah. You see those big teeth? So these fish eat lots of other fish. Okay, and now it's stuck on your nose. Does anyone know this fish? So this is the drum. This is a freshwater drum, or some people like to call it a sheep's head.
Because they're so strong.
So these fish are eating organisms down the bottom of the lake bed.
Yes.
That's what it's all about. I mean, we interact with about 3,500 kids every year. Spring, during April, May, and then in the fall, during September, October, kids come over. At least 3,000, about 55 to 60 different groups from Columbus. We've had them from Cincinnati, all over Northern Ohio come to stay with us. And we do have some programming. We have some scholarships. So if you're at a school where you don't make a lot of money or you can't get grant funds, we will actually help you pay for a field trip to get over here. So this is a very important part of our program. Many of you may know Kristen Stanford. She's called the Island Snake Lady. She was on a episode of Dirty Jobs. You know that show with Mike Rowe? This was rated one of their most top 10 popular all-time episodes, and she got to go on a few years during the pandemic when he was doing a thing and doing like Where Are They Now type of deal with Mike Rowe. So this is still a very popular episode, but it displays all about the Lake Erie water snake, which is still a protected species. The Lake Erie water snake does not live anywhere in the mainland, only lives on the Lake Erie Islands, all along the shorelines. They get persecuted quite a bit. So our message to people is, let's let them have their space too. And she's done the research to help them get off the endangered species list. They were taken off the United States endangered species list in 2011, in part due to her research and telling our people that message. So let's see what that's all about.
Here's a little something from the Dirty Jobs mailbag. It comes from Dirty Sal, and she writes, "Dear Mike Rowe, I swear I just cannot get enough of watching you get bit by those snakes. I'm sorry, I know those fangs weren't fun for you, but God help me, I laugh like a schoolgirl every time I see you dance around in pain. Forgive me, but please, can you please show it again?" I won't lie to you, it's very disconcerting to know that so many people took so much pleasure from seeing me get bit by so many snakes. It's a very painful process, and to this day, I am tremendously uncomfortable being around these creatures. However, Sal, I will show it to you again with one small correction. They don't have fangs. If they did, I'd have been in a much worse shape than I am now.
I'm underneath the rock.
Do you feel it now?
Oh yeah, I'm
So this is probably off North Bass Island where they're now.
Okay.
I found out from Kristen that Lake Erie water snakes are a protected species in Ohio.
Now, is that natural?
Yes, that's natural.
I found out myself that Lake Erie water snake researchers are an unprotected species.
Sorry, everyone. Ow!
So while we had to be gentle with the snakes,
I didn't get bit.
You didn't.
Peed all over me.
the snakes were free to bite us anytime they liked.
I hate my job. Ah, that sucks.
What I didn't know was that in spite of all the pain and blood and poo,
Ooh, God. Crap. We did it again. We squeezed the poo out of it.
it only felt like the snakes were sinking fangs into me.
There you go.
Yeah, so explain to me what, I mean, obviously that's where the fangs, the lower.
No, they don't have fangs. Water snakes have.
No, they got fangs.
Oh, they have teeth.
Yes.
They do have teeth, but
And
not fangs.
they stick out in a pointed way.
in a pointed
One might say
way, in a sharp way.
fang-like. Yes, fangish.
But they're actually really just a rows of small little pin-like teeth that are about 2 or 3 millimeters long, and that's what they're.
Fangs.
No fangs.
Just say they're fangs.
They're not fangs.
They're fangs,
They're
damn
not
it.
fangs.
Fangs.
No fangs.
Fangs.
Kristen was right, they're not fangs.
There you go. Grab it.
I don't want to.
Fangs are hollow, found only on poisonous snakes as a way to inject venom.
Sharp teeth. You're so sharp.
Lake Erie water snakes are non-venomous, and their teeth are solid. I was happy to be wrong about them, because if I had been right, I'd have been dead.
You redeemed yourself, though. That's good. Way to go. Way to go, team.
Yeah, thanks. Could we leave now?
We can leave now.
The next stop was Kristen's lab. So far, I'd gotten the snakes to pee and poo, albeit unintentionally.
The snakes, just got a little aliened on me there.
But the next bodily fluid I came in contact with was not by accident.
Good. Put your hand right here.
Yeah?
Push up right there. Feel that? That's some puke.
This is where we squeeze a puke out of her?
Yeah.
This is what I came here for. And the snake doesn't mind this?
No, it doesn't hurt her, not as long as we're gentle. Are you gentle? Are you being gentle?
I am absolutely loving in my attempts at forced regurgitation.
There you go. Now you're gonna. There.
All right then, made a snake puke. Go ahead and cross that one off the list.
Sorry you just had lunch.
Get this off to the lab. Wait a minute, we're at the lab.
So your first instinct when you grab a snake that pees on you is to drop it.
Sorry.
Actually, your first instinct should be not to ever grab a snake. That's another story. And for the record, poo and blood together, never good.
Now there's poo everywhere and I'm bleeding. I'm covered with crap.
Oh, that smells great.
I totally screwed the pooch with that one. I'm sorry.
A little bit.
That's just terrible.
I think we got no puke in this one.
That's
Although
great.
we have lots of poo,
We have lots of poo.
obviously.
I wrung the poo out of it.
You did wring the poo out of it.
And it bit the pee out of me, if that's any consolation.
Oh.
She's expanding in my hands. Uh-oh. Oh, dear. Oh! Well, look at that.
That's the remnants of a mud puppy.
Bad day to be a mud puppy.
Yeah.
Okay. You can look now. So yeah, the mud puppies there that she just mentioned, so that used to be about 90% of the Lake Erie water snake's prey. But ever since the round gobies invaded, you may have heard of those, the round gobies that came in with the zebra mussels in the 80s and 90s, they've completely done away with mud puppies. So there was some concern that the snake's food source was wiped out. Turns out the snakes are pretty good at recognizing a good thing that presents itself right in front of their face. They just started chowing down on gobies. So that is about 90% of their prey now is round gobies. So they're helping us to control that population, if you will, although there's really no control of it. But yeah, so the Lake Erie water snakes, she may have talked about how much they stink. They let out a musk. Anybody know what Limburger cheese smells like? A very sharp Limburger cheese that's very strong. That's what they smell like. So it's a anti-predatory musk that they emit. It's hard to be around when there's lots of them. But not only do we do field trips, but you may have known Stone Lab. for many years for what it does in the formal education space. So we are part of Ohio State University. We're actually part of a couple things. We're Ohio State University, that's who pays my salary, and that's who our courses are offered from. We really love it when Michigan students come here and they take our classes and they're forced to have that block O in their transcript. That's really cool. So we're part of the Ohio State University. They're going to dock my wages if I don't say that. But we're also part of Ohio Sea Grant. So Ohio Sea Grant, we're one of 34 Sea Grant network universities. Any state that has a coastline, has a Sea Grant institution. We are that for Ohio. So we're 40% federally funded through NOAA, which is the umbrella that Sea Grant network is under, and then 30% funded through OSU. So we're actually more feds than state, believe it or not. But our course offerings in the summer, we offer about 12 to 14 courses a year. Next summer, we're offering ecology and conservation of birds. Basically, you go to all the islands and mist net for birds for a week. General ecology, it shouldn't be ecology. It's really ecology. That's a 6-week course. We have a policy course that's 4 weeks, an ecology of inland waters that's 6 weeks. That herpetology class, Kristen actually teaches it. That's a week-long course. You go out and basically go out with her along the islands and pick up snakes and turtles and frogs and try not to get bit. We have a plants class that is taught every July. And we have 3 sections of an introduction to aquatic biology. Many of you may have had local kids here at Port Clinton High School or Oak Harbor that have taken courses as a junior and senior. So you can be a junior or senior in high school and get OSU credit by taking a week-long course with us. You get a 2-hour credit. That's a science credit for your degree before you even step foot into a college. And it's transferable to any college in Ohio. Excuse me. We have a GIS course for those interested in doing a lot of mathematical modeling and stuff with GIS. We have an aquatic invertebrates course that's 4 weeks, a fishes course that's 4 weeks. We even have, check this out, for course credit, Lake Erie sport fishing, where you go out for a week on our boats, you learn how to catch perch and walleye. We teach you how to clean them. We vacuum seal them for you. You take them home. Not bad. Yeah, you're paying for it, but we house you and feed you in our dorms and dining hall. It's a great course to take. We're actually looking for more people to take it. We had to cancel it last year because we didn't have enough people. So open to anybody. Excuse me. And then we have a water quality, management course. So like drinking water plant operators, if you have a child interested in learning the science behind analyzing samples of water for toxins and things of that nature, that's what our water quality management course is about. Our introduction to aquatic ecology is easily the most popular. It fills up very quickly. We have 3 sections of those. They're 1-week courses. They're filled with high school students, usually freshman level college students, and sometimes just a generic anybody who wants to take a course credit. So we've had retirees come up and take our courses before to get course credit. So you don't have to be, in school to take a course. And we do offer scholarship applications. We tell every person that applies for our course, please apply for a scholarship. We have too much money that we can't seem to give away. For some reason, kids don't want to take the extra step of applying for a scholarship, and they're leaving money on the table. So if you want to come take a course at our island, you're going to get some money. We're not going to pay for all of it, but we'll pay for a bulk of the tuition, room and board, things of that nature. So keep that in mind. We also have professional development workshops. So if you want to come over to the island for 1 or 2 days and just learn a skill, like how to ID algae, mosses, we have spider biology coming next year, crawfish. I say crawfish because I'm from Mississippi. Crayfish is the technical term. ID. Those are all classes that anybody here could take. They're usually about anywhere from like $500 to $1,000, depending on the course. But we house you, feed you, take you out on our boats, put you in the lab. You learn all these new skills. In some cases, you can get continuing education credits, like if you're a teacher or a drinking plant operator. Our algae and cyanobacteria ID courses are continuing ed courses for those folks. So yeah, these 2 young ladies, they took our Lake Erie sport fishing workshops. We have a sport fishing class that's a week, and then we have a sport fishing workshop that's like 3 days in June. So come on up. We also do research. So the biggest part of our research is not so much snakes anymore, but harmful algae. So you may have heard of HABs or harmful algal blooms. So we do a lot in that space. We're one of the forerunners of testing for microcystin toxins and trying to understand why they're happening and what we can do to control them. So we do a lot of work in our laboratories on the South Bass Island to get at those answers. This picture on the far right, this mesocosm unit, thank you, State of Ohio taxpayers. Through state Senate funds, we were able to build a mesocosm unit. So this is 15 tanks with 650 gallons of water that we pump in from Lake Erie, and we can do 15 little bitty Lake Erie experiments at one time. No other institution has anything like it all over the Great Lakes. We're the only one. So we're very proud of it. We've had researchers from UNC Chapel Hill, Florida come up. We've got folks from OSU, Wright State that come up and use our facilities to do their research. So a lot of important work being done on harmful algae there at Stone Lab. We even have a charter captain sampling program. We actually will get volunteer charter captains from all across the mainland. We will train them in EPA methods for collecting a water sample. What they'll do, at the end of their fishing trip with their clients, they'll do a little spiel on harmful algae. They'll take a sample. Our people will go pick it up. And that way we can get an idea of where the toxins are in the lake, because we can only go so far. We have a few fixed stations that we go to all the time, but the charter captains are going everywhere. So we're able to get data thanks to them through that program. So we're very appreciative of our charter captain community. So yeah, we do cutting edge research on everything from harmful algae, fisheries, you name it. We have an EPA certified analytical lab there that most people don't see. We're also involved with collecting data on atmospheric mercury and mercury that falls out as acid rain from the clouds from coal burning plants. So we provide the EPA with data on mercury deposition. And then we have our wet lab research. So this is where the fun stuff, like where you saw Kristen and Mike Rowe, it's what we call our wet lab. It used to be a fish hatchery, but there we can do experiments on fish. We can mark and tag snakes, all kinds of stuff. This past summer, we had 4 researchers from OSU use the facility for 10 weeks to do experiments on turbidity. Turbidity is how cloudy the water is due to algae and how that affects reproduction of fish. So we do a lot of cool stuff there. And then we do work in the field. Like I say, they're called the Bass Islands for a reason, you know. We have some excellent bass fishery. So if you like to recreationally fish for largemouth and smallmouth bass, you don't have to go very far on the islands, and you don't have to fish for very long to catch good-sized smallmouth and largemouth. They're all over the place. We're starting to have a burgeoning issue with mammals like deer on the island. You remember a few years ago, it iced over pretty good for about several weeks, maybe a couple months. Well, the deer were able to walk over from here to the islands and from Kelly's Island as well, all the way over. And now we have this growing population of deer that we didn't used to have. The thing is, it hasn't iced over in the past couple of years, so they've just been on these small islands eating up people's gardens, wine grapes. They love vineyards. And Dustin Heineman hates deer now because they're eating all his grapes. But they'll eat our wildflowers. We have some forest preserves. We're concerned about the deer eating rare Lake Erie Island orchids and trilliums and things like that. So we're studying deer now. We study bats. There used to be only known 2 or 3 bat species on the island, but we have acoustic detectors that we put out on the top of Cook's Castle in the South Bass Lighthouse. We've detected 7 total species of bats. One of them called the Seminole bat. You want to guess where it's normally from? Yep. That just speaks to how things are warming up. We're starting to get bats that had a more southerly home range that are now coming up to Lake Erie during the summer. Seminole bat. Like the Seminole Indians or Florida State Seminoles. They're normally around South Georgia. North Florida is their normal home range. This is our mesocosm facility. It was built in 2021, right next to the Put-in-Bay Fish Hatchery or Aquatic Visitor Center. If you've ever been there, it's right next door. This is where we do a lot of really cool experimental stuff that nobody else in the Great Lakes can do. So again, thank you, State of Ohio taxpayers. Also, State of Ohio taxpayers, thank you for this Flex Lab. This Flex Lab actually looks like a maintenance shop because it used to be a car shop. We turned the car shop into a science lab, so we do research and teaching out of these labs. This is my research education for undergraduate student, RU student. She's from Dayton University. Her name's Amy. She did a project with me on those gobies and how they compete with our native fish for food in the Great Lakes. So great space for our students to learn. Every year we select 4 RU students. Here's another thing for your kids and grandkids to apply for. So every year we offer 8 weeks, $5,500 stipend. We feed you, house you. You get paired up with a supervisor like myself, and you do your own research project. And every year we get about 140 applicants. We only choose 4. This year we had students from Virginia Tech. One was from Heidelberg. Mine was from Dayton. And then we had one from SUNY Cortland, State University of New York. So they're not always Ohio people, but we encourage our Ohio people to apply for these. That's a very good look on a resume that gives your undergraduate family member that quality hands-on research experience that they could then use for grad school or another job that's permanent. So these RU programs are really important. We'll be doing it again next year. So keep that in mind if you have any undergrad level, sophomore, junior, senior level college kids that want a career in this type of stuff. Those applications are opening up, I think, shortly. Here's a little bit of history. So we're the only university, OSU, that owns its own lighthouse. So we have owned and operated the South Bass Island Lighthouse since 1962. We typically house researchers and State of Ohio wildlife agents out there that want to ticket people doing stupid stuff on South Bass Island. But we also use it for tours. So if you come in the summer for a tour, if you're just looking for something to do on Fridays and Saturdays in Put-in-Bay and you don't want to deal with the downtown stuff, take a left off the Miller Ferry to the lighthouse. We have educational programming, and we open the tower up so you can walk up to the second highest point on Put-in-Bay next to the monument. There's a lot of history associated with the lighthouse. We have kiosks that explain the history of all the light keepers that worked there and their families. We have displays on like the weight systems that are inside the house. So you can see how it turned the light. I wish we had our light back, but our 4th order Fresnel lens is actually in the Put-in-Bay Historical Society's museum. It's actually on display. So if you go to the Historical Society by Town Hall in Put-in-Bay, you can see our light from our lighthouse. They also have our cannon from Perry's Lookout. I want to get both of those back one day. Our lighthouse, people complain to us that we don't open it enough. I get it. We're typically short-staffed. Our permanent staffing is like 12 people usually. We balloon up to about 25 during the season. But we've actually opened it up this past summer far more than we have in the past several years. And next year, we might be opening up a few more days like Wednesday, Thursday as well. But at least Friday and Saturday during the summer, June through August next year, we'll have it open. We do a lot of other educational activities like a monarch festival. For the past 3 years, we've hosted that with the Lake Erie Islands Nature and Wildlife Center, where we have butterfly nets out there for the general public. You can come out and catch monarchs. We give you unique identifier tags. You can stick the tag on them. And then hopefully those butterflies make it to Mexico for their overwintering. We actually got 5 back this last summer that made it all the way to Mexico that were tagged in September, hibernated through winter, and then there's a database. They will let you know, oh, your tag, this was tagged in Put-in-Bay, such and such date. It's here in Mexico. They'll tell you. This is pretty cool. Keep in mind, we tagged upwards of 300 and like 5 made it. So, also what we do, we have a MODIS tower. So MODIS towers are all over the U.S. and Dr. Chris Tonra from OSU has the funding to do that. He's the ornithologist for Ohio State. And so we have this tower that detects tagged birds. If you put like a microchip in a bird, if you were to catch it, put a microchip in it, and let it go, there's this network of towers that detects where they are. So we've been able to track a wetland bird called a rail. Its official name is a sora. It's a type of wetland bird that lives in wetlands. It was initially caught and tagged in Illinois. It came to the South Bass Lighthouse and got picked up Halloween of last year, went all the way down to Miami for the winter, and this spring it nested up in Winnipeg. So we can track those migratory patterns of birds that get tagged. And we're one of only 3 islands in Lake Erie that have a MODIS tower. And we know how important the Lake Erie Islands are as stopover points for birds making their migration to and from Canada. They're very important feeding sites for birds, but still need to know a lot more about them. So yeah, if you come out to our Put-in-Bay Science Days with Stone Lab next year, this is what we started this past summer. We'll open up the light tower, and then every week we have a different theme where you can look at critters that are caught from Lake Erie and learn about them, everything from invertebrates to plankton to snakes to birds to fish, you name it. Pollution, we have stuff. So we have staff out there that we hire seasonally. Again, if you know a recent college graduate that wants a career in this type of stuff, we hire people every March. They start work in April. They end about end of October, mid-November. A great look on a resume. So we'll be hiring again 6 new positions next season. So get that word out there if you know anybody that would want to work for us next season. So these are 2 of our biological field station assistants. This one on the left, she's Alexa Gudelman. She was from Ohio University. Go Bobcats. Haley here on the right was from Ohio Wesleyan. So we get folks from all over, not just OSU people. We also offer kids free fishing. So our staff also takes fishing poles out to, used to be the Aquatic Visitor Center. Now we're doing it at Oak Point State Park. If you don't know what Oak Point State Park is, it's the smallest state park in Ohio. You could literally throw a stone across the entire width of it. But we offer rods and reels and worms, give them to kids 15 and under. They can fish for free. And then when they catch the fish, we teach them all about the ecology of the fish. It's really cool, neat thing to see. We're a collaborative effort. So we collaborate with folks on everything from teaching to outreach to research and education. We've interacted with upwards of 60 universities in the past 5 years, many different nonprofits, even private consulting agencies on a variety of topics. If you're interested in getting involved, we do have a Friends of Stone Lab program. Our Friends of Stone Lab are not, some of them are alumni, but a lot of people in that organization are just people that care about what Stone Lab does. And you can either donate your time by doing projects on the island with us, or you can donate money. And all of the money that comes from Stone Lab helps us buy things like microscopes. We were able to buy brand new microscopes for all our field trip students this past year, thanks to Friends of Stone Lab. They fund scholarships. Those scholarships I was talking about that kids seem to not want to apply for, our Friends of Stone Lab program and their many foundations help fund those scholarships for kids to take courses during the summer at Stone Lab. So if you want to get involved that way, we're open to that. We're on the Googles. You can Google any of this. Google Stone Lab courses, fossil. It'll be the first thing that pops up if you want to get involved. Of course, you can just email me directly if you want. I'm Googleable too. But yeah, that is all I have. I get that question every time. The story with the toilet. So we needed new toilets for our dormitory. We have a 12-room, 48-person military barrack-style dorm, and every year we get complaints about it because, come on, folks, it's a field station. There's no air conditioning. It's 2 bunk beds in each room. It's kind of primitive, but we did get new toilets for all the rooms, and those were funded by Friends of Stone Lab, and some of them came up to actually install them for us. This was probably 2017 when that happened. But we do a spring work weekend every year, so people that want to help with that, you basically help us turn the island on, clean things up, get it ready for the season. We house you, feed you on Gibraltar Island. You can bring your spouse or a kid or something, or a grandkid, and come help us rake leaves and paint and all kinds of stuff. Then we have an open house that Fossil does every weekend after Labor Day, where we open up all of our facilities for the public to come visit and see, and Fossil helps run that. So those are 2 every year activities that Fossil does. Just because I'm calling them Fossil doesn't mean they're fossils. But Fossil, Friends of Stone Lab, that's how we say it. But those are 2 activities that people drive up here that are part of that organization come actively do for us. Sometimes it's individual members just saying, hey, I'm free this weekend. There's something you need me to do. Yeah, we could use some help cleaning the dining hall. You want to come up do that? Yeah. So sometimes it's just as simple as that. So we love our Friends of Stone Lab members. We could not function without them. Like I said, we're a total full-time employment of 11, 12 people. It takes a lot more than that to run a field station. So we're very grateful for our volunteers that come help us. Yes, ma'am.
So at OSU in Columbus, if you're above a certain age, maybe 60, you could just audit classes?
Yes, there is. I forget what that program is called. We've had people take it. It's, I know what you're talking about, but I can't think of the name of the actual program that OSU has. Yes. I think I mentioned the birds course. We had a couple come up and take the week-long ecology of birds course through that program. Yeah.
Could go there.
Mm-hmm.
And then no charge.
I don't know about that. I don't handle the business side of things.
What was the question?
Is there no charge for that program? Maybe.
Seniors to come up.
But there's a senior program that OSU has to take formal courses, like our week-long college courses. I forget the name. Program 60. I think it's called OSU's Program 60 is what it's called.
Oh, you were talking about the algae situation. What is the current status of that being hopefully improved?
TBD. I will say we've had better than expected seasons in terms of how the extent of the bloom has been. They scored on a 1 to 10, where 10 is all over the lake, or at least the western part of the lake. This year is about a 5. Past few years, it's been like a 3, 5, something like that. And that's almost entirely due to lack of rain. Not necessarily it wasn't about taking or keeping phosphorus on the farm fields instead of having it erode off. There's still a long way to go for that to happen. But our research scientist, Justin Chaffin, with the UNC folks that came up and studied with us, they just put out a pretty big paper the other day in the journal Limnology and Oceanography that said it's not just phosphorus we have to watch after, it's both phosphorus and nitrogen. Because it's the nitrogen that triggers the gene in the algae that turns the toxin gene on. So you could have a big pea soup looking green bloom. If you don't have any nitrogen in it, it's not toxic. Likewise, you could have pretty clear water and you not notice a bloom at all, and that nitrogen could be in there and turns that gene on and can be toxic. So the general rule of thumb has always been, if it looks green, don't get in it. Don't let your pets in it. Well, it's more sophisticated than that. So nitrogen is, forgive the term, but the best way to describe it is poo water. It's untreated sewage, it's animal feedlots, it's wildlife in parks that contribute, it's combined sewer outflows like my house in Port Clinton, which sometimes gets out into the streets and into Lake Erie. It's that stuff that carries the nitrogen that turns the toxin gene on. We got a long way to go with that. There are some wetlands being built as part of the H2 Ohio program that Governor DeWine implemented, and the legislature, 3-4 years ago now? 42-ish wetlands have been built over the past 3-4 years, most of which are in the western Lake Erie Basin. Those need to mature. So they're not filtering anything out right now. There's no plants in them to do that functionality that we need them to do. So the answer to your question in the short term is no, nothing has really happened to keep the blooms at bay. We've been lucky with the rain during the March, April time period where it matters most. So that's my best answer. I saw her hand first.
Do you do any collaboration with the diving in Lake Erie?
We did. We had a dive master, Matt Thomas. He has taken a job with Muskingum Watershed. So we no longer have a dive program. OSU is an awful lot of red tape, and basically we don't have enough to get through the red tape to start that program back up again. So no, we do not do any more diving. One of our previous directors, Eddie Herdendorf, just put out a giant memoir. It's like 800 pages of his diving and the work that he did for decades on describing the fish reefs all along Lake Erie and the geology of a lot of the islands around Lake Erie because of his diving. I would divert you to that if you can. I think he's got it on sale. I don't know if it's online. He just did a whole speech about it over in Put-in-Bay in September, so I'm not sure how available it is, but that would be your best bet to find out any information on diving related stuff in Lake Erie.
I have a question about dredging. That can't be good if you're dredging and then dumping it back into the same water a few miles down or whatever. So what are they doing about that issue so they won't dumping it back into this?
Well, that's not in our shop, but that would be more of the environmental regulation aspect of things. Corps of Engineers, those types of folks are responsible for that, for regulating that. There are some studies happening. I just heard some yesterday from Lake Huron. There's some islands out in Lake Huron where they're concerned about dredging that was applied as coastal erosion measures for islands out there, and they're worried about it. Some of the PFAS chemicals, the forever chemicals, leaching out of those sediments and getting into drinking water. So there are people looking into that. But as far as the regulatory aspect of it, I'm not sure where that is, where we are.
Where did they where did they dump it?
I'm really not sure how extensive that is here, but in the islands anyway.
Do they try to, have a place on land?
Typically, it's usually not a landfill. They're usually prevented from dumping it in land. There's been some concern by folks. Are you just dumping it in our community landfill? It's not supposed to happen. Whether or not it does, I don't know. But there's typically designated areas to dump that stuff that are not supposed to be going to groundwater or leaching out into surface water. But how that gets regulated, that's up to the states and the federal agencies like EPA, Ohio EPA. Yes, ma'am.
In regard to the environs of the Lake Erie water snake, is it, could you be a little more specific? Is it only in Lake Erie, and is it all through the Lake Erie Islands archipelago?
Yes, so all of that is correct. They only live in Lake Erie, and they only live on the Lake Erie Islands. Now they've usually been considered a subspecies of the northern water snake, which is the mainland species, but I think recently they've been promoted to species level. So typically northern water snakes have they have a brown body with vertical dark bands on them. People mistake them for moccasins all the time. The Lake Erie water snakes are losing those dark vertical bands, and they have a gray body, which matches the limestone of the islands. So they're quite a bit different. And as far as we know, based on tagging studies, they do not move to the mainland. They don't swim over. Even though they're good swimmers, they're not swimming over to the mainland and hybridizing with snakes there. They're only on Lake Erie Islands.
Are they on Johnson's Island in Sandusky?
I believe so. Yeah, they should be. Yep.
But they're not in any other island in any of the Great Lakes chains.
I have to check on that. I don't believe so. They might be. I would need to check on that with Kristen.
I was working at this hotel. I'm from Fort Hood, and when I went outside to check things, And some of my guests were saying, "Oh no, a snake, a snake." And so I run out there. It was one of those water snakes and it sticks way up like this. It was going swimming. And I said, "Don't touch that. Don't harm that snake." So I did see one down in that area where.
Okay. Yes, sir.
When you go out and net these fish,
Uh-huh.
have you ever gotten sturgeon in there?
One time, as far as I know, I heard the story. I think it was 2016 or 17. There's been a lot of sturgeon reintroduction going on. Detroit River, Maumee River now. If you've been to the Toledo Zoo, maybe seen their operation. There was about, I want to say they said like maybe 3 foot long juvenile that was netted up in one of those fish trawls several years ago. I haven't seen one. I used to do lake sturgeon restoration work at the University of Tennessee because they used to be in the Tennessee River as well. But the ones that they are tagging at Toledo Zoo, so they put in little microchips as well for those little bitty sturgeon that are raised in the little streamside hatchery out by Toledo Zoo. And the thought is if you imprint them with Maumee River water, so they're raising them right on the side of the Maumee River, that they will remember that smell and come back to it when they're adults 20 years from now. Excuse me. So they've tagged them with these little bitty tags, just like you would tag your dog or your cat. And there's this array of sensors all through Lake Erie that a lot of people use for various things, not just sturgeon, all sorts of tagging. So if a fish swims within 200 yards of one of these sensors, it'll ping, and you know it's been in that vicinity. Well, there's a neat little animation that the Toledo Zoo has created of their tagged sturgeon and where they ended up. It's really neat how they almost immediately go downstream of the Maumee, go out of the mouth. They'll start going along the north coast towards St. Clair, and then they'll go on the southern coast, and we've had one go right in front of the Gibraltar Island docks and camp out right in front of Gibraltar Island, even though we never knew it was there until we saw the data of the tagged fish. So we know they're there. We know they're surviving at a pretty high rate, like well over 90% of those that they release are surviving. So thing about lake sturgeon, being the dinosaurs that they are, they're in no hurry to reproduce. Males, it takes them 7 to 8 years to get mature enough to produce milt. It takes female lake sturgeon anywhere from 17 to 20 years to start making eggs. And female sturgeon do not reproduce every year. So they'll go once every 3 years or once every 7 years, or maybe there's one that'll do it a couple years and then stop and wait a few years. So it's a very disjunct, asymmetric type of spawning periodicity. So they have a lot going against them in terms of keeping up with people. You destroy the dams that get rid of or you put up dams that block their spawning migrations. You put in a lot of pollution in the lake that kills them. It's going to take a long, long time to get them to natural we're talking 30, 35 years to get enough year classes in the system for them to be okay. So we can stop reintroducing. So that's a long program. And that's what we were dealing with in Tennessee as well. There's other fish. You may have little darters or minnows there's one called the black chin shiner. Anyone ever heard of it? Black chin shiner only lives in wetlands on the Lake Erie Islands. Not anymore. They're extirpated from there, meaning there are no individuals left. Now they're other places along the mainland. We want to get them back to the Lake Erie Islands, but they reproduce every year, and it only takes them 1 to 2 years to get reproductively ready. So there's a lot better chance for those to make it than a sturgeon. But nobody knows what a black chin shiner is. They're not charismatic megafauna like a sturgeon is. You can pet a sturgeon in the touch tank at the Toledo Zoo. You're not petting a little minnow. That's just a silvery minnow with a little black spot on its chin that everybody says, it's just a minnow, who cares? But that minnow evolved right here, and it's only been here for however tens of thousands of years. We came along, wiped it out. Now the lake's getting better. They are growing some at OSU, and they've got them in a little ARC population on some fake wetlands in Columbus. So one day they can be brought back up here for reintroduction. But nobody's going to know because
Where did you get where did they get them?
there are still populations that live in areas along the mainland, other wetlands. They're just not in the islands anymore. Their core populations used to be Middle Bass Island, the wetlands out there, Middle Bass, around Peach Point, off of Chef's Point, east part of South Bass Island. So that used to be where people would collect them all the time, very regularly. And then one day, boom, they're nowhere to be found again in the Lake Erie Islands. So that's why I say extirpated from the Lake Erie Islands. There's still some populations elsewhere. I saw your hand first.
Those minnows were extirpated. Would that have to do with the round goby?
Yep. I don't know that the round goby would have much of an effect on them because round gobies stay on the bottom. Minnows are going to be up top. They shouldn't be much of a problem for those. Pollution was probably the biggest aspect for them. Now the lake, minus the harmful algae issue, from a chemical input standpoint, we're far, far, far better than we used to be in the 60s before the Clean Water Act. So, and that's when they blinked out.
Next year will be the 100th anniversary year.
Yes, you did the math.
Are they planning anything special?
Yeah, so again, Friends of Stone Lab is planning, if you want to be involved with that and join, Friends of Stone Lab is planning a big 100th get-together. Unfortunately, given the size of our island and the constraints of ferries and all that, we're only inviting 100 people for that. But it's just going to be hors d'oeuvres and speakers and things of that nature. There will be a shirt with a logo that's 100th anniversary of Stone Lab that we're creating for that event. So those will go on sale hopefully next spring. But yeah, there will be, and the Stone family's coming up. Bruce Stone, like I said, their family has been very involved with Stone Lab for a long time. So they're going to be there. And we were trying to get some of Jay Cook's people, but they're kind of hard to nail down.
How big a problem, if any, is the goby?
This is one of these catch-22s, I guess. So the gobies are a huge problem. They're bullies. I've got them on camera. They will go up to other native bottom-dwelling fish like a log perch. Anybody know what a log perch is? Really pretty fish that they look like perch, but they only get about that big, and they live on the near shore of Lake Erie. Used to get them by the hundreds, just with little net trawls. Now you'll be lucky to find one here or there. I've got them on video with gobies headbutting them to get them out of the way. The gobies have taken over the bottom. They've almost eliminated the mud puppy. Mud puppy is a type of salamander that snakes used to eat. They've eliminated some other benthic or bottom-dwelling fish. However, and they also prey on bass eggs. They will devour a smallmouth bass nest in the springtime. They will just absolutely come in like little termites and eat all the eggs that a female lays as soon as she lays them. But if the bass can get big enough to avoid predation, the bass eat the gobies big time. That's their primary prey in Lake Erie right now. Used to be crawfish. Now it's goby. Same with the snake. Snakes used to be mud puppies. Now it's gobies. So we have to thank the gobies, I guess, for keeping our bass fisheries so good and also keeping our snakes around. The snakes actually increased their reproductive effort, their egg laying, because they were able to get fatty and get bigger because of the goby. So we took them up. They were one of the first animals to be taken off the endangered species list back in 2011. That's an aquatic species, thanks in large part to an invasive species being their primary prey. So but yeah, they're pretty bad, minus the good stuff. I mean, you can say the same thing about zebra mussels too. You all know about zebra mussels. They clog up pipes. They get all over your boat holes. They get over your docks. But things like freshwater drum, the sheep's head that you saw in the video, that's what they eat. because all of our native mussels have been wiped out by the zebra mussel. That's another organism I study, are our native mussels. Our native mussels use fish to attach their baby like little vampires, and they have to get attached to the gills of fish and then all that kind of stuff. Anyway, long story. Zebra mussels they can skip that stage. They don't need to do that. And so the zebra mussels have figured out a way to attach to anything hard, including other native mussels in Lake Erie throughout the Great Lakes. So they suffocate our native ones. So now the sheep's head have to eat the zebra mussels instead of the native mussels that they used to eat, and snails.
Speaking of which, are the Asian carps under control, or?
Asian carp. So Asian carp are currently being checked by an electronic curtain and a CO2 gas bubble curtain on the Chicago Sanitary Ship Canal that connects the Mississippi River drainage, where they're at, to the Great Lakes drainage. So if they can pass those two barriers, they get into Lake Michigan. They get into Lake Michigan, it's just like the gobies. They're just going to fan out everywhere else. They're not here yet. They'll get here, though. I have zero confidence in electricity and CO2 wall of what happens when the power goes out. Generators go out. They'll find a way. I mean, most things that got into Lake Erie got in there through transfer through ships. There's nothing stopping a ship from carrying them in. They're not here yet, but maybe it'll stay that way. Yes.
And mayflies?
Mayflies. I love me some mayflies. So mayflies are great. They're annoying as all get out every June, right? Why shouldn't they be called June flies? But yeah, the burrowing mayflies, there's two species of giant burrowing mayfly. They spend 99% of their life underwater on the bottom of Lake Erie. Most people don't know that. The one you see flying around, getting everywhere, that adult stage lives 1 to 3 days. They mate, they die, that's it. They're like salmon, mate once, die. They'll live 1 to 2, 3 years in the bottom of Lake Erie. And what nearly wiped them out was the oxygen levels. You ever heard of hypoxia or the hypoxic zone? We still get it in the central basin of Lake Erie off Cleveland, still a problem out there. But it used to be lake-wide. There used to be so much pollutants, so much productivity in the lake that it would suck the oxygen out of the bottom of the sediments, and practically all the mayflies were gone from the Great Lakes. Clean Water Act comes in, you clean up a bunch of that loading that comes into the lake, you start seeing this massive increase starting around 1974 right into today. They pretty much leveled off now. But just know this, when they're a nuisance to you, that's a good indicator that the water quality, or the bottom sediment quality at least, has enough oxygen in it to support life. So mayflies are a huge part of the diet of sturgeon. Big time diet for sturgeon. They're a huge part of the diet, all of our spring birds that come up, especially our swallows. If you like purple martins and tree swallows, huge mayfly eaters. If you like spiders, Gibraltar has this weird characteristic of being one of the hot spots for spider biodiversity, partly because spiders build webs to trap all the insects that emerge out of Lake Erie. So spiders make things look bad. The barn swallows build those ugly nests on our porches, but that's what they're eating. And purple martin populations globally are in severe decline. Purple martins, among other issues, cold snaps can kill them. But if they are not nesting at the right time when the insects are emerging, they'll die. Like we had a big group of purple martins die on Middle Bass Island because they got here too early last year because it was such a mild, warm winter last year. They got up to Lake Erie early, like a couple weeks early. Insects weren't ready to emerge from the lake. So they had nothing to eat. So it's just this massive, the ground was littered with purple martins that came all the way up from South America just to get to Lake Erie to lay eggs and died. So the bugs are good.
Our home is saturated
Oh, I'm sure.
with mayflies.
Don't squirt water at them.
No, I know that. We're shoveling them in our front yard. But down the road, they don't have them, so they have them. Why is our problem?
What's your light situation?
Off, dark.
Yeah. It could be a wind thing too. So when we get what people perceive as bad hatches, that's almost like where we are locally. If it's very swarmy, that's not necessarily because they're emerging out of the lake right here. It just means the wind is taking them from wherever they've emerged. So it could be a wind. I don't know what your wind situation is, if it's just blowing them to you.
I don't know, you'd have to come and see.
But the best thing to do is just get your leaf blower out, blow them, and hopefully they'll go to somebody else's.
You're talking over our field, Mayfield, and it's crawling.
Feeding all those birds in that hayfield. Yes.
This is a historical society.
Yeah.
I have a question for you on that.
Oh boy. It's like my oral exams all over again.
Jay Cook built his castle over there.
Mm-hmm.
They were going to put the monument
Yes.
on Gibraltar Island.
Yep.
Why was it moved to South Bass Island?
So if you come to one of our summer tours, we give Thursday tours, one at 10 o'clock, one at 1 o'clock. You jump on the water taxi at the Boardwalk restaurant. We do a whole history tour. So please come by. It's $20 a person, or maybe $12 a person. Excuse me, $12 for adults, $6 for kids, hour and a half. Walk around Gibraltar. We teach you about the history. That's one of the things we talk about is Jay Cook's fascination with Oliver Hazard Perry. It's part of the reason, really the only reason why he wanted to buy the island, because of that fascination. So Jake, he built a monument it's about as tall as me, yay high. And it says, the plaque on it, guess whose name's bigger? It's not Perry's, it's Jay Cook's. This monument erected to honor, by Jay Cook, to honor Oliver Hazard Perry. So it had a dark black obelisk on top of it in kind of a football-shaped bowl. That obelisk is gone. We have no idea where it is. But that monument is still there next to Cook's Castle, and we talk about it. There's a time capsule underneath that he put some stuff under there. OSU folks dug it up in the mid-'80s. I don't even know what was in that time capsule, sadly. But I know that the folks in the 80s put in like boxer shorts and Buckeye football tickets. And I think we're scheduled to open it up next year. We'll see what happens. But so yeah, basically Put-in-Bay and the federal government said, you know, it's too much trouble for people that want to come tour and see this monument for you to have your own personal thing. Because he did not like people coming to his island. He had to invite you personally. And he didn't do anything on Sundays. He was very religious, ecumenical. He would have meetings on Saturdays with a lot of very different church organizations. He's a very charitable person, but shut things down on Sunday. And they're like, no, we got to have something that's more available to people to recognize that peace between Canada, Great Britain, and the U.S. So the folks at Put-in-Bay National Park Service said, we're going over here. So, and actually that area that it's on wasn't even part of South Bass Island. They had to build that area to make it connect the East Island to the West Island. So if you haven't been to the Perry's Monument, great place to go. Although it's killed a lot of birds. We've started, they've actually, the past 2 years, they've been turning the light off at the top on the tower during spring and fall migration periods. They've been very nice to do that. I can't tell you how many birds I have in our Stone Lab collection from the 30s, 40s, 60s, you name it. And the tag says, killed by lighted monument, killed by lighted monument, killed warblers, vireos, all kinds of things. They would run into the monument on their migration, drop down to the plaza below. Park Service would bring them over to Stone Lab. And folks like Milton Troutman and his wife would skin them and put them in our collection. So we're hoping that fewer migratory birds and bats will be killed by the lighted monument during the migration period anyway. So anything else?
I just noticed looking online, sometimes I look at the maps of the algae bloom.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like in the Sandusky Bay, they have a different
Yes.
season and they might have a different kind of algae. What would cause that? What's the difference?
Short answer, we don't know. But every year, Sandusky Bay usually gets a different type of cyanobacteria called Planktothrix, and it produces its own toxin. And it's done this every single year, and it's usually all year long, a little less in the winter, but it doesn't get microcystis like we do in the lake proper. George Bullerjean and some folks at BG have been researching that question. They're trying to figure that out as why that is the case. They think it might have something to do with the Ballville Dam in Fremont being destroyed or taken down, 5 years ago? And you get that pulse of different water coming down into Sandusky Bay. They don't know that yet. But it's kind of thrown them for the loop because in the summer of 23 and 22, Planktothrix left and it was microcystis. And there's another one called Dolichospermum and Cylindrospermopsin that got in there too. They don't know why or how. So, yes.
Could windmills, work with migration pattern?
For fish or birds? There's both. There's concern that windmills would have an effect on migratory birds because there's data across the country that says windmills have been responsible for bird mortalities. Is it enough to control their population numbers? I think that jury's still out on that. Maybe for some species, but there is concern that the windmills that are being planned for off of Cleveland might be an issue for that.
Time's up.
Is that enough?
Yeah. Dr. Alford, we thank you very, very much for your
You're welcome.
presentation. We're very, very blessed to have a facility that we do this close to us, with Lake Erie being the huge resource that it is. And on behalf of the Ottawa County Historical Society, present you with this book, who the author is right there in the plaid shirt. Perhaps he'll sign it for you if you ask him. The first history of Ottawa County is already signed? Okay.
Thank you.
History of Ottawa County, the first 175 years.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yes. And I'll say one of the things we're attempting to do is kind of like these maps here. We want to showcase some of the early illustrations and maps of Ottawa County, particularly the islands, and put them up as artwork around our buildings and the South Bass Lighthouse, because right now they're just random pics of wildlife. So we'd like to include some more historical illustrations in the lighthouse for people to see. So we're working on that as well. So thank you.